My name is Timothy Moore. I am a videographer, editor, animator at the Globe and Mail. So I think that particular video started with our executive producer reaching out to a reporter in Ottawa, actually. We're located in Toronto. And she reached out to Gloria Galloway because Veterans Affairs was sort of her unofficial beat. And she was just saying, you know, if you have any subjects that you come across that are good for video, we're always open and receptive. So I don't know how exactly she came across Mike, but a few weeks later she came back and said, I have this great veteran who has an interesting story to tell. And so she flew to Toronto. I picked her up. We drove about an hour up to Barrie, where he was living, and sort of had a sit-down interview for about an hour and a half, shot a little B-roll, came back, started editing, and just based on sort of how the rough edits were coming together, we sort of felt like we needed a little bit more from him, so went and shot a second interview, maybe about half an hour long. Shot some B-roll there. It was basically just at his new job, and just shooting a little bit of sort of life in the office. And then, funny enough, we sort of edited a bit of that into the piece and evaluated it, and then sort of took pretty much all of it out, and then went back to the content from the first interview. And it was more because he was very passionate, and he had really prepared himself for the first interview. You could tell when Gloria was interviewing him, just sort of he had the narrative how he wanted it down. There was an article that sort of, because we sort of had it finished, and we wondered, you know, should we publish this just on its own, like we do our daily video content, or should we try to tie it to a story? And originally I was hopeful that it was just going to be a video. We hadn't really done anything like that for quote unquote like documentary style videos that we do. So I was just hoping that, you know, a video could stand on its own. There was a story that Gloria was working on that was about veterans, the sort of general consensus about the new charter being not enough. I don't really know what the sort of the birth of that article was, but she said, you know, this is the perfect pairing for the video. And so we just sort of reorientated sort of the publishing schedule to go with that, and it actually, I think the video performed the best inside the article. The article was really heavily shared, and the video just had a high what do we call it? Completion rate. Had a high completion rate. And I think that part of that was because of it's publishing along with the story. And I sort of learned something through the process too, which was just comparing other video first stories that didn't have any story pairing with it. They just don't do as well on our website as they do when they're paired with the story. I think when you're condensing an hour and a half into 6 minutes, obviously there's going to be a lot of cuts. You know, he'd set up a topic and he would give 3 examples, and each example was really great, but we really don't need to hear 3 when one will do. So there were lots of edits, which just meant we shot on one camera, so there would have been a lot of jump cuts if we didn't have a lot of good B-roll in there. And most of our B-roll was stills based. There was a little bit that we could shoot, even shoot by arranging the stills, and as opposed to just scanning them in and using them, like laying them out nicely on a table and shooting them with a camera just to give us some variety and a little more leeway on the edit. but there were still lots of holes, even that the stills wouldn't cover. So, that's, I think, where maybe some of the more graphic-based elements started to seem like a good option. And I'm also an animator, so that sort of process is I'm using on most videos to some degree, and I can do it fairly quickly. So it's always an option for me to go to. Like, just thinking back, I think that the map probably could have been a little bit more in line with. I felt like I've watched it, recently, and I just kind of feel like the map doesn't necessarily have the right feel to it. It's close, but it could be a little bit better, and I think that's just a challenge with that type of creating that type of B-roll. We sort of, after the interview, we went to the beer store. We drove to the beer store together because he told us a great story about dealing with PTSD, and how one particular example stood out in his mind when he realized something, before he was diagnosed, that he realized something was happening to him and happening to him and his family. So, I know that when we were doing the interview and he sort of just told the story offhand and moved on pretty quickly, that I knew that was the opening sort of image that I wanted to use. I think two things. One, with the content, just preserving the reason why he wanted to talk to us, which was that he is unhappy with the new charter for veterans, and he wants it to go back to the way that it was. From a B-roll standpoint, just keeping it interesting, keeping it specific. You could throw a wash of, we had, probably 50 unused photos from him on his various tours of Afghanistan, and you could have, another editor might have put up all of them, might have chosen to not see Michael on screen that much and see more of him in the field. And I'm just always really sensitive about B-roll not becoming a wash, and I'm really sensitive really of exit points for people. Someone trying to get people's sound bites really tight, just really efficient, so that the sequence of the narrative is well paced, and I just never want anyone to sort of sit back and wait for this section to get more interesting. I want it to be very present, people to be very present all the time. So, that's always a challenge, I guess. And I hope I did a good job. I don't know. The greatest type of interview B-roll is when your subject tells you a story. It's amazing when it's right on point, and it's related to the story you're telling at large. But just creating an environment where people can sort of not just sit there and answer your questions, but feel like they have the opportunity to speak and don't edit themselves too much, and just sort of treat it more like a place to just dump information. That is the greatest thing.